Hi everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is the first video of a long series that I want to create thanks to your support. For this reason, register on the channel in order to always be updated. If you like the video or have any suggestions, please leave a comment or a like. Today we will talk about how to use the cockpit triggers to check the player's use of the radio. As I said, this is the first video of the Lessons Learned series, in which I will show you the different mission editing features used for the Operation Little Sparta campaign in progress. Let's start by describing the test scenario. This scenario uses the DCS A-10C module, but as you can see we are also extending it to the other modules of the campaign. Soon we will do the same video for the F-18. Let's start by creating a radio menu with which to call the control tower on frequency 124. Then we will test that the player selects the correct radio with a switch, in this case the AM radio. Finally we will have to test that the frequency set on the radio panel is the correct one. Let's try to understand how these types of conditions that control our cockpit settings work. We have an ID argument that identifies the cockpit object we want to test and values that express the position of the cockpit object. These values range from -1 to 1, and the range setting must always be made so that the value we intend to test is between the extremes. It must not be one of the extremes. The ID and the increment from -1 to +1 that identifies the position of the cockpit object can be found in the Lua files as indicated in the manual. Let's see our example by opening the files. The first file to open is the one relating to the HOTAS commands with which you select the radio on the A-10C. As we see we have two argument IDs 751 and 752, respectively for the up-down and forward-backward movement, and we see the values they assume in the different positions. It will be enough to insert these values in our trigger to satisfy the condition that interests us. The second file is the one where we find the radio settings. By opening the clickable data file, scrolling to find the radio section. It is necessary to know the characteristics of the module. In the case of the A-10C we have 4 rotary controls that set the frequency. DCS controls both the position of the rotary, with arguments 139 to 142, and the value represented in the radio display, in this case with arguments 143 to 146. So if we want to test the frequency we will use the IDs from 143 to 146 in the trigger conditions. Subsequent numbers indicate how often the value changes in the -1 + 1 range. We then complete our conditions by setting the different arguments, each for each position of the radio frequency. With some tests it is possible to appropriately center the minimum and maximum values. So if the frequency is set correctly on the radio panel, flag 3 becomes on. Then we created a flag 2 if the pilot selects the correct radio. On the A-10C with the switch forward, right, the radio AM is selected, then flag 2 becomes on. Finally we create the trigger that when the player activates the radio call tower menu, flag 1, and at the same time the radio used and the frequency set are correct, the call message starts. Otherwise no. Good. Now let's get into our cockpit. If the radio is on the correct frequency a message created for this test appears for every second with a delay of 5 seconds. When the frequency is not correct the test message, once the 5-second queue is exhausted, it disappears. We also inserted a test message to check the radio selected with the switch. Now let's do the test with all the true conditions and see the call message to the tower start. If, on the other hand, we try to call the tower with the wrong radio, the message does not start. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like. Thanks and see you next time.